Hello and welcome to Museum Moments. My name is Molly Dubin and I'm the curator with the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And for today's museum moment, very fittingly, we thought, being that Halloween is just a couple days away, that we would look at our good friend Harry Houdini and particularly his chapter of life where he um, looked at spiritualism, spirit photos, seances, and debunking frauds. And so many of you may recall we had an exhibit called Harry Houdini, Inescapable, The Life and Legacy of Harry Houdini. And we got a chance to explore this very interesting chapter of Houdini's life. Um, we don't have, of course, a lot of time to delve into all the different chapters of Harry, but we're going to focus on the spiritualism. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to pull up the PowerPoint and get going with some images. So here we have Houdini with that very intense gaze about him. So again, looking at spiritualism, seances, and debunking frauds. So just a little bit of a background because it kind of helps us to understand how Harry Houdini got down the path of being interested in seances, mediums, and ultimately debunking the mediums that were running those seances as frauds. So Houdini, we know, was born as Eric Weiss on March 24th, 1874 in Budapest, Hungary. We, of course, know that he spent time in Appleton, Milwaukee, traveling the vaudeville circuit, performing in dime stores, other places before ultimately becoming the superstar that was invented, Harry Houdini. So this chapter of Harry's life really begins with his beloved mother, Cecilia niece Steiner, who is seen here with his wife, Bess, and he has the inscription there, "My two sweethearts," and this is from 1907. And Houdini's mother was incredibly important to him. He had a very, very close relationship. And when she died in 1913, he really took it extremely hard, as could be expected. And he started down the path, or so the story goes, of spiritualism seances with the want to connect to his mother's spirit. So we should say that there are 2 points in history where kind of mediums and connecting with the spirit world had kind of big spikes in the US and around the world. And that was following the Civil War and following World War I. And that had a great deal to do with the fact that so many young individuals died. And there were so many families in mourning. And unfortunately, there were these mediums, these psychics out there that were looking to exploit that grief, that vulnerability. And I also want to say that part of the reason that there was some belief that there could be a possibility of connecting with someone after they had died and connecting with them in the spirit world somewhat has to do with the fact that this coincides with the advent of the radio. So if you can imagine having never before been in the presence of a radio, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a room and you're listening to a voice coming from a disembodied voice coming from a box, that probably seemed incredibly magical. Of course, technology behind it, but with all the technology that was also coming about at this time, it starts to get people thinking maybe there's more out there than we really know about. Maybe we should be believing in other things. So there's a very famous story which we'll talk about, which really gets Houdini going down the path of debunking. But following his mother's death, very much in line with those families that were grieving. He attended seances and with the hopes of connecting with his mother, getting a message from his mother. And it was at some of those seances that he quickly began to realize that there was some fraudulent things happening. And that kind of began this idea of trying to get to the bottom of what was behind what the mediums were doing and to expose them for the frauds that they were. So here's a great poster, and he did many shows about this. So here the title, "Do Spirits Return? Houdini Says No and Proves It." So the story of that really, kind of solidifies his feelings so adversely towards seances and feeling the need to expose this for the fraud that it was, has to do with his relationship with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And here's Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, an individual that is very scientific-minded, forensic-minded, rational individual, but apparently had attended a seance when he was a young medical student, which began his interest in the occult. And he wound up marrying an individual who claimed to be a medium, and she went by the name Lady Jean or Lady Jean Doyle. And here is an image of Harry sitting at the table with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a 1922 shot. This happens to take place in Atlantic City. So the story goes that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his wife, Lady Jean, invited Houdini to participate in a seance with the goal of Lady Jean getting some type of message from Harry's mother, Cecilia. So once the seance occurs, Lady Jean turns to Harry and says, "I have a message from your mother," and basically goes on to say a number of things, but the first of which is that she wishes you a Merry Christmas. Well, of course, you can imagine Houdini becomes skeptical right away. First of all, because they were Jewish. Second of all, his mother basically spoke Yiddish, very with a little bit of broken English mixed in there. So the thought that the first words that his mother may communicate from the other side would be Merry Christmas did not sit well with Harry Houdini. And this really begins the strain and ultimate demise of the relationship between the two of them, which is unfortunate, but it also kind of strengthened Houdini's conviction in the need to expose this fraudulent activity, as we say. So one of the other things that was coinciding, and again, this has to do with technology and advances. So one of the other thing that is happening at this time are spirit photographs. And the idea being, we've probably have all seen some incarnation of these over the years or at one point, but where you would see an image and there'd be some type of an apparition in the background, or some type of orb in a shape. And here Houdini is actually kneeling with an apparition of himself, and he did a number of shows and kind of showing how, demonstrating how these photographs were made, that they weren't in fact real. Here's Houdini with the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. So again, technology, we have advances having to do with photography, certainly with film. So, you get into looking at the tricks of the camera, what you can do with overexposure, with double exposure, superimposing images. So it wasn't difficult for Houdini to demonstrate to those who may have been sucked into this situation of believing that this in fact was not real, and here's the proof, because I can create one and you can too. So again, he took this on the road, and here's a shot outside of a theater where a number of young children are waiting to go in and see Harry Houdini, who I'm sure was doing some of his magic and escapism, but also, as you can see, according to the signs in the background, exposing frauds and mediums methods. So what Harry used to do was disguise himself and go, when he was out debunking, not performing the shows, he would disguise himself in some way, some of these crazy costumes, and he would go to the seances and pretend to be or play along to be a participant. And after, a certain amount of time being there, and it wasn't uncommon that he might bring a couple of policemen with him for, the big moment where he would throw off his disguise and, expose them for, the game that they were playing. And he would say, I am Houdini and you are a fraud. He had a partner that he often, took with to these seances to do debunking as well. And he felt, as we'd said earlier, for all those families who were grieving and had lost loved ones, and he went through that with his mother, he just felt compelled. And also because he felt what he was doing was true magic. And he always, challenged anyone to try and disprove what tricks he was doing. But certainly here, he was able to expose these individuals. So we know that Harry Houdini has a very untimely death on Halloween in 1926. It's a story probably many have heard, having to do with probably a bad appendix, but certainly with some sucker punches by a college student in Canada. He dies at the age of 52. Probably much more would have come from his amazing talent, but he dies very young. And of course, because of the time that he spent, before debunking, wanting to connect with his mother, and then the time afterwards, on his deathbed, he says to his beloved wife, Bess, who is seen here, that if there's really anything to this, I'll try and send a message. So what happens is, a year after Houdini's death, on the first anniversary, 1927, Bess holds this first seance, which she does for nearly 10 years until she decides enough is enough, and famously says 10 years isn't long enough to wait for a man. But so that they would know if actually Houdini's spirit was coming through before he died on his deathbed, he and Bess came up with a code. So the code was Rosabelle Believe, and that is connected to the fact that Rosabelle was their song. So that was the way that, they had decided this would verify if this was in fact Houdini's spirit. And there's another example of a Houdini seance. This is a tradition that has continued for many, many years. It continues today, in fact. There are official Houdini seances, there are unofficial Houdini seances, but there are still believers out there who want to, believe in that sense of magic, the possibility of connecting. Of course, integral to these seances, having an image. You can also see there's some handcuffs, a book, items that Houdini would have had in his life, touched or worked with to help conjure his spirit. So this is something that continues. We, in fact, when we had our Houdini exhibit, we did a seance. It was a little bit more for fun, but certainly some interesting possibilities afoot there. And for those of you that were there, you'll recall what I'm talking about. But in any case, as I said, she best stops the tradition about 10 years later. So here is the final seance that she holds, and here's Bess with Ed Saint, who was Bess's manager and business partner. You can also see there beside, the handcuffs and things and the front table, also this spirit horn, another instrument that was used to try and call the spirits. We know that, in fact, he never came through. Bess was asked about this to great extent on her deathbed when she died in 1943, said that he had never come through. But as I say, the tradition continues, and there are many out there that believe, and probably many that want to believe. It's part of the magic surrounding Harry Houdini and his story, and certainly a good story for Halloween. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our museum moment. I want to thank Robin Cohn for sponsorship that helps us to continue to bring this type of programming. And we hope that you will tune in for upcoming programs, check out what we have going on online, or of course, come and visit us at the museum. And we will look forward to seeing you physically or on the screen, or if Houdini's involved, maybe in some other manifestation. Have a great rest of the day.